Hey guys, and welcome to the Kurima podcast, where we talk about business, finance, entrepreneurship, and real estate. I'm your host, Jason Kurima, and I have a very special guest today, Josh Lien. Josh, it's a pleasure to have you, man.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. So Josh is a mentor of mine, and he's also our senior pastor at the Monette Nazarene Church. And so he has an incredible story, and I just really want to dive in, and I want the world to really see, all the things that you've been able to do. And maybe this will inspire some people as well.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Jason, and to hear that a mentor. That warms my heart. So thank you, thank you for saying that. So my story is unique, like everyone's, but mine is unique in how I got to become a pastor. Like a lot of people, I grew up in the church as a kid, and as I grew up in the church, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this before, or maybe you have, even when you're growing up in the church. Growing up in the church, a lot of times I seen the way we acted on Sunday, and then I seen what real life was like Monday through Friday, or Monday through Saturday. It was different, and I kind of picked up that in my life. And as I grew into my adult years, I lived with this duality, where I would act a certain way in front of certain people, and I'd act a different way in front of other people. It was almost like I was a chameleon. Like I could color myself to fit in whatever crowd I was in. Yeah. And with that, though, came addiction, came really just me living a lifestyle that was not healthy or holy or helpful to really anyone. I was married at a young age. I grew up here in Missouri, but I moved to Phoenix when I was a teenager, when I was 18, and I got married out there at a young age. And I'd never really dealt with these, demons, the shadow side of me, this part of me that wanted to be deceitful, this part of me that wanted everybody to believe that my life was great, right? Including at this time my wife, but behind closed doors, whether it was me taking pills or addiction to pornography, I was living a different lifestyle. And so in my 20s, I got married. I was 21, and I was in the fitness industry then. I was running gyms in Phoenix, Arizona. And with that comes a very heavy schedule, really a 6-day, sometimes 7-day a week kind of deal. It's the kind of environment that actually really fed my ego. It really fed this shadow side of my ego, right? Because it was all about how much can you sell, how can I convince someone else to buy personal training from me, and instead of being it in an honorable way, like wanting to help people, which I'm sure there was part of that in me. What I went this way of how can I, regardless, right? What can I promise? I promise you whatever if you will buy this personal training from me. And so I actually was very successful at selling the personal training, but there was really no substance. It was a very surface level thing. And so it really fed into my ego. And at a young age, as I went up in the gym industry, I started to party even more. There was actually even a point in here when I was in the gym industry that I was actually working in a church. I was working with youth ministry. But that's not something I could keep doing because there was just too much of this other lifestyle, you know? And so I was moving up in the gym industry, but the problem with that was this, is as I was moving up in the gym industry, it opened me up to more opportunities to start having affairs. So I started sleeping around on my wife. I continued to drink, and I continued to do drugs, and I actually hid it from her for a long time. And then about 5 years into our marriage, it started to surface what was going on. And at that point, when it surfaced what was going on in my life, I made a decision that I would go into rehab. And the thing about it was this, is I tell people this all the time, is that I checked into rehab as an addict wanting to get clean when I should have checked in as a liar needing to get honest. Because the thing is even when I was in rehab, I was only doing it for the show. Because honestly, even when I was in rehab, I found a way to sneak out when I was there. And I would sneak out and I would go and drink and I would go and party and then I would sneak back into my room. And so I never actually took that seriously. And had I, like, man, if I could say something to young people, man, like if I had just been honest, right, been truly transparent about who I was and what I was struggling with, if I had invested in some close friends and been honest about what was really going on behind closed doors, it would have set me free. There's no doubt about it. But instead, I kept myself bound up in these excuses and in these lies. And, you know, here's the thing is that excuses and lies, they keep you bound. It's the truth that sets you free.
Yep.
And for whatever reason in my 20s, I could not get to that truth, you know? And so I left rehab early. I convinced my family that I was better and that I was ready to move on with my life. And for a while, I think I even convinced myself. You know, sometimes you get so good at lying that you even believe your own lies.
Yeah.
And I think I convinced myself that I was okay. And for a while I was able to hold it together. But the thing is I never dealt with those root issues in my life. You know, I never really surrendered my whole life to Christ. You know, there's always, and maybe some of you guys can relate to this that are listening, or maybe you can, Jason, there was always this part of me that was always closed off to God, right? And this was this part of me that maybe I thought was so broken that God couldn't fix it. Maybe this part of me that I needed in order to escape into when things got overwhelming or the pressure got too much. You know, when I got overwhelmed or the pressure got too much, I could escape into the pornography, or I could escape into the drug use. I could escape into some way to disassociate myself with what was happening. So I get out of rehab. I was able to hold it together for a while. But eventually, what happened is it's embarrassing to say this, but I feel like it's also important for people to understand where I came from. At the time, my wife's grandma had cancer, and with cancer comes a lot of pain, and with that came prescriptions. And I knew that her grandma had these prescriptions of pain pills in her bedroom, and so I started sneaking in there, and I started taking those pain pills. And I'll never forget the day that I got the phone call, and I was asked, "Have you been stealing my grandma's pain pills?" And in that moment, I knew I was caught. And so, again, like I still circled it with deceit. And so instead of saying, "Yes, I stole those. Yes, I still need help," I said, "Yes, I stole them, but I stole them because I wanted to sell them." And I told her that I still have no idea why to this day I said that, but I told her I wanted to sell those pills. And for some reason in my mind, the idea of me selling those pills was better than me actually taking them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
And so she asked me, like, "Where's the money?" And I said, "Well, I've already spent it." And so that lie continued. And here's the thing is after that, we kind of buried it and kind of didn't talk about it again. And by this point, we had 2 daughters, Nevaeh and Brielle. And so I was no longer in the fitness industry. I was actually selling air conditioners at this point, and which was also a very lucrative thing to sell air conditioners in Phoenix, Arizona. So was making money, and but that only lasted so long because I still hadn't dealt again with those root issues. You know, we swept it under the rug, and a few years later, I found myself actually out of selling air conditioners back into the fitness industry, and I found myself again cheating on my wife, sleeping around again, and right back into the addiction, right back into the drinking. And at that point, when it surfaced again, she left with our 2 daughters, and that was when I was 30 years old, and so 15 years ago. And I've talked about this before, and sometimes when I've shared messages, this might be the first time it's going to be recorded, but it was like this. It was like, do you guys, you know what like a governor is on a car? Like keeps it from going so fast?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I had a governor on my life up until that time. Like once I hit 30, once I went through that divorce, like it was like this governor was taken off my life. And like, yeah, I struggled with addiction then. Yeah, I made bad choices then, but I just dove in like full steam ahead at 30 years old. And it wasn't long until I picked up my first DUI, and I was actually driving my daughter to school, and it was on the way back home that I started like passing in and out of consciousness. And by the time I got back, I was living in an apartment. I got back to my apartment. I pull into my parking spot, and this undercover cop jumps out of his truck with his gun raised at me, and it makes me get on the ground and said he's been following me for how many ever miles that was, and I was swerving in and out of traffic. And at the time, I hadn't been drinking anything, and I hadn't taken any drugs at that time, but I had been prescribed Xanax. And so they took me down to the police station, and they drew my blood, and up in my blood came Xanax. And I don't know if I was having some kind of reaction to the medication of some sort, or whatever, but for whatever reason, that medication had affected me. And it says on the side of the bottle that you're not allowed to drive if you're taking these medications if they're affecting you. And so I got a DUI for that. And after that, things just continued. Like you think you hit rock bottom, right? I don't know how you guys can relate with this. Like you think like, man, that's it. Like you hit rock bottom. But the thing is I didn't realize how low rock bottom was going to be. And I ended up getting evicted from the apartment I was living in because I stopped paying my bills. I really stopped caring about life. And after I got evicted from that apartment, I went and lived in a friend of mine's. He had a place he used for storage. And I went and started staying there. And when I was there, I picked up my second DUI. And at this time, I passed out in a parking lot after drinking too much, and I got lost on the way home. I couldn't find my way home, and so I just pulled into a parking lot, passed out, and woke up to the cop knocking on my window. And I picked up my second DUI. They took my car. And so at this point in my life, I'm living in this storage room. No car. I have to take the bus now. I've lost almost all the rights to see my kids at this point. I'm seeing them maybe every other weekend. And when I think about it, right, like when I kicked off my 20s, right, when I moved to Phoenix, man, I thought I had it all together. Like I was doing great in fitness. I was even working in the ministry some. I got married. We were having these kids. Like it looked like from the outside, right, like I had my life together. But the thing is, behind closed doors, it was a wreck. And eventually that wreck surfaced, and I found myself at 32 years old living in this storage room, having to take the bus everywhere. I was working at a gym, and it was at this point that I found a loophole at our gym to where I could look like I was selling all these contracts of personal training, and when I actually wasn't, and get paid for it. And so I wrote $76,000 in fake contracts over a 2-week period. And at this point, I was actually drinking at the gym at work. I would keep I think they're called Four Locos, like these big old things of alcohol. I'd keep them in my locker, in the locker room, and I would go in there and I would drink, and then I would fake the contracts. And I was actually in charge of the gym at the time, and I'd run these sales meetings and just be like drunk and high out of my mind. Anyways. Here's the thing is you cannot, even if you find a loophole, you can't write $76,000 in fake contracts and think you're not going to get caught.
Yeah.
Right? And I was over, there was a grocery store next to the gym, and I was over there, and I didn't have any money at this time. So what I'd do is I'd go to this grocery store because it served breakfast, and I would order my breakfast, and I'd grab it and say, hey, I'm going to go get a drink from the store and the grocery store because it was inside there. And I would just walk out and leave almost every day without paying for my food. So I was stealing food from the grocery store to eat. I wrote all these fake contracts. Anyways, I'm coming out of the grocery store, and I look over there, and I see my boss's some at the gym. And he never came to my gym, so I knew at that moment why he was there. And I ran to the back of this gym and this parking lot, and I just started to melt down. And what I did is I texted some of my friends in Missouri, and I said that I'm in trouble and I need to leave. And they didn't know what the issue was. They had no idea, but they said, okay, we'll get you out of there. And for some reason, I went back in the gym, which I'm very thankful I did that to this day. But at the time, I don't know why I did. But I went back in there to face him. And they ended up not firing me, which is unbelievable to think. Maybe they had other plans to prosecute me later, but at that time they just demoted me. and said, we'll deal with it later kind of thing. I think they were trying to still sort through like what was the depth of my deception. Mm-hmm. But it was right after that this was in November of 2012. After getting 2 DUIs, after trying to steal all this money from the gym, that I thought the best thing to do was run. And so I will never forget the day that my ex-wife brought my daughters to a McDonald's, and this was in 2012, November, and they had no idea, but I was saying bye to them, and I abandoned them, right? Right there at McDonald's. Yep. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I even remember Nevaeh. She's our middle daughter, and I remember, like, I don't know why I remember it so well, but I just remember, like, she had this, like, she couldn't let go of me in that time. Like, she was just clinging to me, and she didn't know what was happening, but I did. I told myself this lie. I said, if I can just get away for a year, look, I'm going to go to Missouri. I'm going to fix myself. If I can get away for a year, I can be in my kids' life for the rest of their life. A year is well worth that cost. And so that's the lie that I told myself, that's what I need to do. Not thinking that those demons, right, me, I'm still going to be in Missouri when I get there, you know? Yep. Like it was me that I needed to deal with. Anyways, my friends buy me a plane ticket. I pack a bag, and I leave Phoenix, November 2012, and I get here in Missouri, and like I said, it's not like I got here and I'm like, let's figure this out. You know, let me start meeting with a therapist. Let me start meeting with my pastor. Let's unpack this. Let's get better. Let's actually stick to the plan. Now, immediately when I get here, what I do is I just start partying, you know, and it was this time that I started doing crystal meth, and again, and my friends that brought me here had no idea that this was my life. Again, I you know, from the outside in, I still even made them think that everything was cool.
Mm-hmm. So they weren't the ones that were partying and stuff, were they?
No.
Okay.
Now they would, I mean, like normal, like
maybe drinking, partying, kind of stuff like right? that, but not drugs.
Yeah. So I'd have we would go out, we'd go do stuff, and then I would have this after party with the people that I'd go do drugs with.
Yeah.
You know, and so I start doing that, and I've written a lot about this, and there's this moment that I remember where it was almost 2 years later. So I think it was the end of 2013 that I was living in this house, and I continued to do meth, and it was like I was getting super paranoid, and I remember climbing up, running through my attic because I thought there was a family living in my attic. And I kept running, trying to chase them, run across the rafters in the attic. And I get to the end of and I could see the family there, right? I could see them. And I get to the end of the attic, and it's just this big nest of mud daubers. And so it's not, obviously it's not a family living in my attic, but I was losing my mind. Mm-hmm. And at this time, when I'm in the attic, I hear someone pull up into the driveway. And so I go running back across the attic. And right before I get to the attic hole, boom, I hit my head. And so I climb down out of the attic. There's just blood just pouring down my face.
Dang.
Yeah, and my friend's at the door, and he had no idea what was going on in my life. And when I opened the door and he saw me, he knew. He's like, dude, what is going on with you? And I think back to that moment. I think back to like what happened, right? Mm-hmm. To that idea that I was going to take 1 year. Right? I'm going to fix myself. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to be a dad to my daughters. And here I am running through an attic chasing an imaginary family. It wasn't long after that that I got kicked out of that house for stealing. It wasn't long after that I got kicked out of the next place I was at for stealing. It wasn't long after that I got kicked out of another place. All friends along the way for stealing and for doing deceitful things to them. Had a cousin who ended up deciding that he was going to help me out, and he came and picked me up. I left Phoenix with this suitcase, right? He came and picked me up, and I had a trash bag, you know, and so I graduated to a trash bag for all my belongings, you know. It's just crazy to think, you know, 21 years old, I built my home, right? First home, and here I am at 32, and I'm living out of a trash bag. And he takes me actually to Carthage, Missouri, and they put me up in a basement, so that I'm staying in this one room in this unfinished basement. Couldn't drive. Uh, um, had no relationship with my kids. Living out of a trash bag. And there's one day that I noticed in this yard there was this tree, and I had struggled with thoughts of darkness before, but I think I had convinced myself. I told myself so many lies that I believed a lot of them, and some of this. Once I got to Carthage, some of those lies started to evaporate, and I recognized how hopeless and how much in despair I was. And I saw this tree, and I thought, man, I feel like I should just kill myself. And it would be much better, like it started like simply like this. Like I just wanted to never have existed. Like I would just beg, even at this point in my life when I was not necessarily, I didn't even really believe God existed anymore. And if he was no good. And, but I just wanted to never have existed, like desperately wanted to never have existed. And so I started to plan how I was going to hang myself in that tree. And I put a plan together, and as I had this plan together and I was getting ready to follow through with it, I got a call from my mom. And my mom told me that my cousin, Jeffrey, who was 18 at the time, had just died in a car wreck. Damn. And it was shocking news to me, but at this point I was super numb. And so I was like, I mean, that's too bad, but I don't know what you want me to do about it, kind of thing. Yeah. And she's like, I want you to come to the funeral. And I'm like, no, there's not a chance. I'm not. And only a way a mom can do, right?
Yeah.
Right? She got the plane ticket and she twisted my arm, on this, like this same weekend that I was supposed to like take my life, right? Mm-hmm. To go to Phoenix, Arizona to this funeral. And so I fly to Phoenix, Arizona to go to the funeral. This is in 2014, October. And I go to the funeral. First of all, when I get there, the whole time I am just doing drugs. I am literally out of my mind. And doing meth and heroin, and I'm drinking, and go to the funeral. I don't remember a whole lot of it. I know it was a big funeral because he was a powerful, impactful young man. And the funeral ends, and I leave, and the next day I head to the airport. And my flight is it goes from Phoenix, Arizona to Atlanta, Georgia, and from Atlanta, Georgia to Springfield, Missouri. And so I board my flight, and on me I have meth on me, and so I'm doing meth at the airport. I get on this plane, and on the flight from Springfield to Atlanta, I start to lose my mind. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but I know that I was convinced that the guy sitting next to me was trying to get in my pockets and get my drugs. And I didn't find this out till later, but by the time we got to Atlanta, they were not going to let me back on another flight. And I'm not sure exactly what I did or what happened, but I know that I started to lose my mind on that airplane. And but at this time, I didn't know I was not going to be allowed onto another flight. And so we get to Atlanta, and I get off. I have 20 minutes to catch my connecting flight. Mm-hmm. And 2 hours later, I kind of come to, and I'm just like roaming around the airport. And I realize that I've missed my flight. And I run to Delta customer service. And when I get to Delta customer service, it's and I want to preface this part of my story with this, is like, I don't know what parts of this is true and what parts are not true. And so if you're listening, just bear with me. But I get to Delta customer service, and I tell this lady that I missed my flight, and it's almost like she had the answer to everything I ever needed in my life. Like she just offered so much comfort. She offered so much hope, and she's like, oh man, we will get you taken care of. We'll get you on this next flight. No big deal. And so she prints out my ticket and gives it to me. And I leave, and I go and sit down at a terminal. And as I am sitting at this terminal, man, I don't even know how to explain all this, right? Like I'm sitting at this terminal, and what has happen is I'm overdosing on drugs. I'm overdosing, and I start thinking that I'm hearing like these people on the roof, and they're saying my name, and at the same time there's these rocks falling from the ceiling on my lap.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, how do they know who I am? And they're laughing, and these rocks are falling on my lap. And so I just get up and I walk and I move to another part of the airport because I'm losing my mind. And I sit down in this seat where there's no one around me. And like immediately these two girls sit by. So one sits right next to me and one sits across from me. And I don't recognize the girls. But as they're sitting there, and I am trying to figure out what in the world is going on, I see these people walking in the terminal in the airport. And as they're walking, I notice these rocks fall out of the ceiling again onto their shoulders. And I hear that same laughing. So I'm like, I don't know what was real and what was not. And so I hear that same laughing. And now these two people who I think I know start telling me these stories, right? They start telling me these stories from my childhood, things that I hadn't really told anybody, things that I didn't even know about, honestly. And man, this sounds so crazy. I don't know how much you guys want to put in the podcast, but
no, this is awesome.
They start singing this song, and the girl sitting across from me goes, "What is that?" And she could hear them singing this song, and so at this point, I just like I'm melting down, and so I just get up and I take off again, and I go and sit down at another spot in the airport. And as I am sitting there trying to figure out what is going on, this thought just slams into my head that says, "You are dead." And I look up, and again, this is just so crazy. Like, if you guys don't want it, you can get rid of it. Okay?
I love this. This is awesome.
So I look up, and when I am looking up at the people that are walking around, they all of a sudden look like three people that I know. Same three people, same three faces, just in different types of bodies. So like some are like, there are three girls, three cousins of mine. And some of them were older, some of them were younger, some of them were cheerleaders, some were business people. And they're the same like faces. I don't know what was happening. And all of a sudden there's this one person that does not have the same face. And I make eye contact with her, and she starts crying. And it's in that moment that I realize that she also realizes she's dead. And so I know it's insane, right? So I stand up and I start walking on this walkway. And I don't know how long I walked. I don't know if it was a circle. I don't know how long it was that I walked, but I walked on it. And I was convinced that I was dead. And at some point, I made this decision to sit down again. And I sat down again. And it was in that moment that this darkness, this evilness, this vile, this wave just came over me. And it was in that moment that I knew that I was getting dragged, my soul was getting dragged to its eternal destination, that I was going to be separated from God for eternity. And I did the only thing that I could think of to do in that moment is I started to cry, and I just was crying and crying. And as I was crying, I realized this, that if I'm crying, I must be breathing. And if I'm breathing, I must be alive. And so I just started saying, "God, forgive me. God, forgive me. God, forgive me. God, forgive me." And I'm telling you this, that evilness, that wickedness, that vile, that death that was swallowing me up was just wiped away. Like there was just this tidal wave of grace and love and mercy that just washed over me in that moment, in that airplane, in that terminal seat. And in that moment, I know that God saved my life. Right there, I was saved. And but here's the thing: is I'm still overdosing on drugs. So all the craziness just closed right back in.
Okay, I wanted to tell you this, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But I felt like the most chills. I felt when you were telling that part of that, I felt like I was almost like levitating. It was like super weird.
Wow. Like when God saved me part?
Well, no, honestly, the dark part. But
Yeah.
literally, like, I got like the most chills I've ever had, I think, and then I literally felt like I was rising. It was super weird.
Whoa.
It was like very trippy, but I don't know.
So you want me to keep?
Yeah.
Okay. It might get weirder.
That's all right.
All right. Make sure I'm okay with it being out. All right. So here's the thing: is in that seat, God saved my life. There's no doubt about it. But then the crazy closed back in. Okay. And so here's what happens: is all of a sudden I'm sitting in this terminal where my return ticket goes to. And so I get up and I go stand in line. Man, this is crazy. All right, so I'm standing in line to get on the airplane. And I don't know how to say this. I'm just going to say it. And this guy who works at one of the stands there starts talking to me. And he starts telling me that I stole that plane ticket. And I argue with him. I say, I did not steal it. I went to customer service and they gave it to me. And for some reason, I said something very offensive that would be specifically, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it was, but specifically offensive to this guy. Mm-hmm. And I called him a name. And when I did that, it almost like physically affected him. Like it pushed him back. It was like an assault. Now, here's the part. I don't know if I'm going to share or not. Maybe you guys can edit it out. I wasn't speaking. It was in our minds, because I'm losing my mind. And so this conversation's happening. I don't know what's real, what's not real, okay? And so, I have this conversation with this guy about my ticket not being legit.
But without using your mouth.
Without using my mouth, And so, and then I use this profanity towards him. When I do this, it pushes him away. And I turn around and I give my ticket to the ticketing agent to get on the flight. And he goes to scan my ticket. And it doesn't do like the rest of them. The rest of them, green, ding, go get on the plane. Mm-hmm. Scans my ticket, red, can't get on the plane. And he scans it again and scans it again, and it don't work. And in that moment, this is so crazy, okay? I keep saying it, but in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I had to apologize to this guy, right? And so I leave the ticketing agent and I go and apologize to this guy for calling him a name. Mm-hmm. And when I do this, there's this audible ding in the airport. Okay. And I go to head back to get on the flight. Okay. And as I go to get back, I try, the ticketing agent is gone at this point, and I try to scan it myself. And it won't. The door's shut. I'm trying to scan it. It won't scan. It won't scan. It won't scan. So I still couldn't get on the flight. And so I turn around and I walk away and I sit down. And this lady, she sits down behind me and she says, "Do you need a return flight?" And I say, "Yes, I need a return flight." And she tells me to go get up and sit in this seat. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I get up and I go, and the seat she tells me to sit in is a handicap seat. Okay. This is crazy. All right, so I sit in this handicap seat, and as I am sitting there, a handicapped lady walks by that needs a seat, and I refuse to give it up because this lady, she had told me, right? She had told me that if you want a return flight, you got to go sit in that seat and you cannot move. And so I sit there, and this handicapped lady comes up, and I will not move. I stay in that seat, and I guess what happens is we start to board again. So this is, I can't put it all together in my head exactly what happens. So we start to, the flight, whatever, starts to board again. We get up in line again. Okay. And what happens is this guy that was sitting next to me, who was not in a handicap spot, chose to give up his seat for the lady that was in a handicap spot. Okay. Are you following? Is this making sense? So when I should have given up my seat, I would not, but he gave up his seat, okay? And so we go to get back on the plane, and I still can't get on it. It's still red every time I scan my ticket. And the ticketing agent says, maybe you should go back to customer service and see if they can help you out.
Yeah.
I've never shared this out loud. I've wrote about it. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I go back to this customer service, okay? And I go to customer service, and when I go to customer service and I say, "Hey, I need a return flight back to Springfield, Missouri," and she's like, "Okay," and she starts typing away, and she starts talking. No, she gets on the phone and she starts talking to this person, saying he has all these points and he could use them. And I think what she said was he has these future ministry points and he could use them, but they're not available yet.
Wow, that's really cool.
Right? And so this is I don't know, man. I don't
know
what's
It was like
happening.
An out-of-body experience, it sounds like. That was not even...
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay? And so whoever she's talking to says that I can't use those points at this time. And they send me to this bank of phones, and they say, you need to go and talk to somebody on these bank of phones. And so I go over to this phone and I pick it up. And when I pick it up, the lady on the other end says, Josh, says my name. How she knows my name, I have no clue. And she says, Josh, how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm trying to get this return flight back to Springfield. And she starts looking, and as she is looking, she puts me on hold. And as she puts me on hold, there is this person behind me that needs help. It's insane. So what I do is I turn around and I help this person. They're trying to work on this kiosk. They can't get it to work. And I turn around and help them. Okay. And as soon as I help them, I hear one of those audible dings in the airport again. And then I go back to the phone, and she's back on the phone. She goes, we were able to get you a return flight. Go back to the desk and they'll print out your ticket for you. Okay. So like, I'm starting to like put these together. Like, I help this person. I apologize to this guy. Like, it must be if I can earn these things. Like, if I do good deeds. And so I go back to the ticket. She prints out the ticket, and she prints out the ticket. She gives it to me. I have my ticket. Okay. And as I am walking away, there is this other guy that walks up, and he is not speaking English, and he's speaking to this lady, and they're trying to conversate with each other. And for whatever reason, I say, hey, can I help? And she says he needs a return flight back to his family. His daughter's waiting on him. And I just say, he can have mine. And the lady goes, you know that you cannot go back if you give this ticket up. And at this time, I'm starting to think,
like eternal, like life.
Yeah. And I say, okay, I'll give it up. And she's like, okay. She types it up. She prints it out and gives it to him. And I start to walk away thinking, like, this is it. Mm-hmm. I made my decision. And she says, as I start to walk out of customer service, she says, hold on, wait a minute. She's like, there's been a change. And she calls me back over, and she prints out a ticket for me. And she gives it to me. And she says, here's your return flight. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, yes, keep going.
So here's what happens is in this customer service, everything felt like at least somewhat stable. Man, I step out into that airport, and it is like I am in the wild, wild west. It is just crazy, right? All of a sudden, when I step into the airport, I start to see like angels. Like the guy that I had fought with was an angel working in this airport. There's just people running around everywhere trying to get their return flights, trying to get to, I guess, their eternal destination. Again, I'm prefacing this like, this is nothing, there's nothing theological about this, right? I had done a bunch of drugs, but this is what's happening, okay? Yeah. And so I come out of the airport, and I don't know if you've ever seen The Truman Show.
Yeah.
So The Truman Show, like, everyone is watching him, and he doesn't know it. And that's what I felt like when I walked out of the airport. Like, everybody knew that I was on this journey, and they were watching to see how I would handle it. Mm-hmm. And as I walk out of the airport, and this is no lie, I turn right, and I'm walking, and I look down at my ticket, and it has this word coach written across it. And immediately this voice in my head says, you could get a first class ticket. And so I'm like, how do I get a first class ticket? And like, again, my crazy head, this voice says, you need to go help that lady. And I look at he goes, you need to go talk to that lady over there. She was your first grade teacher. And I look over there at this lady that is standing in line at this place. Gosh, I don't know what was real or not. So I go over to this lady and I say, hey, you were my first grade teacher. And I don't recognize her from Adam. I have no idea who she is. And what I remember her is saying, well, what book did I give you to read? And in that moment, I randomly put two words together. Like, I picked up like On Air, and I put it together. That was the first book, On Air. And she's like, no. And she's like, you don't even know me. And in that time, there was a buzz in the airport. And as I started to walk away from her, because I was super embarrassed, I look at my ticket, and the word coach starts to go away. It starts to like fade away. And in that moment, I panic. And she had went into this like restaurant. You want me to keep like,
yes,
it gets crazy.
Keep going.
Okay. She went into this restaurant. Okay. And so I go to follow her in here, but the doors are locked. I can't get in there. And so I find this back way in, and I get in this back way, and I run in there. It's almost like I'm in the behind the scenes at like Disneyland or something. Like, all the employees are in this place eating. And she sees me and makes eye contact with me. And she goes, you should not be in here. And as she says this massive Samoan guy comes out of the kitchen with a knife coming towards me. And I could just see on his face murder, you know? And she's like, you should not be in here. Get out of here. And so I just take off and I run out of this, like this break room area. And after I get back out into the airport, I start walking again. And I get this chance again to help someone else. And I do it this time. I give them directions on which way to go in the airport. And when I do that, there's the ding. And I start to see first class just lightly start to appear on my ticket.
So you went around and you're like doing a bunch of good deeds, right? And then when you're doing these good deeds, your ticket's changing
Changing to say first class on it. And so when it does this, like, boom, like I just, like, I'm going back in style, right? And so I just start literally running around this airport, trying to do these acts of kindness, trying to help anybody and everybody I could. And I don't know that I actually helped anybody, right? I can't imagine what it would be like if you could see the footage. If I really ran around the airport
what's running through my head is like, man, I wonder if they still have it in an archive file or something. Like, how cool would it be to find that film?
And a lot of it gets spotty at this point for me. But I know that I'm running around trying to help people. I know at one point I'm so out of breath, I feel like that I'm just going to pass out. So I go into the bathroom and I start washing my face with water. And as I'm washing my face with water, it's like I have this like vision, and this vision, like I feel like I'm told to write this book called 10 to 1 about my experience. And I actually refuse to do it because I don't want to be found out as a fraud, because look, this story I'm telling is just so insane. And I walk out of that bathroom and there's this maintenance guy, and he goes, "Can I help you? Do you need help?" And I said, "No, I don't need no help." And he just shakes his head and he walks off. And I felt like that maybe he was there to help me. And so I sit down again, you can cut out any parts of this you want, Jason, okay? Because it gets crazier, man. I sit down at this seat, this terminal seat, right? And like, I don't know if I was just full blown in psychosis, but all of a sudden I was on an airplane, and this airplane was crashing. And like, we crash into the woods, and I can feel us crashing. I can feel my skin burning. I can feel the seatbelt burning into me. And as it crashes, like somehow I understand that I was the only survivor in this airplane crash. And then also in that moment, I realized that that's not true. You're in an airport. And all of a sudden, I'm back in this airport. And I wake up or come to or whatever it is in this seat. And there's this guy, another guy there. This guy was a security guard. And I think his name was either Melvin or Marvin. I'm not sure which. And somehow I started to recruit him into this mission with me. Right?
Of doing good deeds.
I need to get my return flight. I want first class. Like, and here's the thing: is I would run away from him, and I would be trying to do these good deeds, and like there was this. And here's the thing: is I knew the time on my ticket, and I knew I was getting close to time to board, and if I didn't get there, I was gonna miss my flight. Okay, so I've been running around, and when I start to notice this, I start to take off towards the gate, and I think it was B-47, and this is at the Hartsfield Jackson Airport in Atlanta, Georgia. And I went back there to check all this out, and there is no B-47. It ends like B-45. So B-47, I'm like trying to run to this.
It's like one of those movies it's just so crazy, but I love the story.
Yeah, it is. You want me to
Yes, keep going.
And so I'm running to the gate, and here's no lie. This is what I remember. It could be a lie, but this is what I remember is as I'm running to this gate, there's all these people that I know that are standing there, and they all have these banners. And they all have these balloons, and they're all cheering for me. Like, they're cheering for me as I'm getting to the gate. And as I get close to the gate, I think to myself, I don't need my bag anymore. So I had this backpack on. So I take my backpack off, and I throw it in the trash. And when I look back up, all those people they're taking down their signs, they're taking down the balloons, and like the air has been let out of the airport. And they're just like, oh. And so I keep going to that gate. And as I'm going to that gate, there's an announcement over the intercom that says, if you are boarding the flight on B-47 and you don't have your bag, you have to have it. And I just threw my bag away. And so I go back to this trash can, and I open this trash can, and in this trash can, there's just nothing but emptiness. There's no bag. And over the intercom, if you want your bag, it's at customer service. And so I have to go back to customer service to get my bag. And so I turn around and I take off towards customer service. It's just at this point that somehow I meet back up with Melvin or Marvin, whichever his name was. And it's at this point that somehow here's the part where it gets really spotty. Somehow he gets me out of the airport into his car, which was a security car, it was a cop car of some sort. I was in the back seat of it. And some other insane things happened there. But eventually what happened is he drove me to the airport, or to the hospital. And I remember I got out of the cop car or the security car, whatever it was, and I go up and I lay on this gurney. And all I remember is a lady saying, "You're laying on it backwards." And then I was just gone. And there was, in the hospital, there was such a fight for my life. So much darkness, so much evil happened, but also so much goodness. And there was these times when I was like just so close to Jesus in this airport or in this hospital. And eventually I woke up, and I skip a whole lot right there. I don't know if I necessarily want to go into all that, but everything that happened at the hospital. But it was crazy. And I wake up and I'm strapped to a hospital bed. My shoulders, legs, they're strapped. I have these big like mittens on, like with no fingers, so that I can't scratch myself, I guess, or I don't even know what, like, babies wear them, so they don't scratch themselves with their fingernails. I had them on. And I woke up in that hospital bed, and the moment I woke up, I knew that God had saved my life. And
That's amazing.
Insane as this story is, I knew that God had saved my life. I knew it. There was I was under 24-hour watch, so there was always a nurse sitting there with me. And so there's this nurse sitting there with me all the time, and the psych team, I guess, I don't know exactly what it was. They would come in and they would talk to me. Sometimes it'd be 2 of them, sometimes it'd be 3 of them. I don't know if you've ever seen 12 Monkeys, but in 12 Monkeys, like, there's these scenes where all these psychiatrists are talking to Bruce Willis, and then they would ask him all these questions because he was losing his mind, and then they would leave. That's what I felt like. Like, they would come in here and ask me all these questions, and I would lie about who I was, and because I still wasn't real sure what was real and what wasn't. And eventually, I started to understand what was going on. That like, if I ever want to be unstrapped from this hospital bed, I'm gonna have to tell them who I am. And there was a time one of the doctors came in, and I finally told him who I was. And at that moment, he unstrapped me from the hospital bed. And I'm telling you something else, like, something changed in me in that moment. When I finally chose to tell the truth, it was like there was just break in me. Like this thing where I always struggled my whole life to do what was right. So much, like this bent, like I always wanted, like, if you would have asked me, I would have never said I wanted to ruin my life. Never, but for some reason I couldn't help myself. And it was like when I finally told the truth in that airport, it was like that bent change in me. Like the Holy Spirit just filled me and changed me. And it was right after that I asked the nurse that was watching me if I could have a Bible. And she brought me a Bible, which I still have to this day.
Oh, that's awesome.
And at this point, I was still John Doe in the hospital. Like, nobody knew who I was at this point because I hadn't told anybody. I didn't have my wallet on me. My family didn't know where I was. Nobody knew where I was.
So when you said you threw your bag away, you literally threw your bag away and you just, like, in the trash can?
In the trash can.
Wow.
Yeah, with my wallet, with everything. And so they didn't know who I was. My family didn't know where I was. My friend that was supposed to pick me up at the airport, I talked to him later, and he just assumed that I finally ran away. Like, it was just, everything was too much, and I just decided to disappear. And but somehow, I don't really know how, my sister tracked me down. Maybe once I finally gave them my name, because I was there for about a week, my sister tracked me down, and my phone rang, or the phone in the hospital room rang, and I talked to her. And I think I freaked her out because I told her all these stories about these angels and these demons and all this, earning my return flight back. And but I talked to her, and hearing her voice, man, it was just like, I'm alive, right? I'm alive. I should be dead. I'm alive, and God saved my life, and I have this new lease on life. And it was a few days later that my cousin, he drove from Carthage, Missouri to Atlanta, and he picked me up at the airport, or he picked me up at that hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. And here's the thing about this too is I left this part out. At some point in the airport, I thought that I have really terrible vision. I thought God wanted to heal my eyes, so I took my contacts out and I threw them away. And he didn't heal my eyes. And so I'm basically blind, you know? And so I'm running around this airport basically blind. I'm in the hospital blind. And I just remember driving back from Atlanta to Carthage and I couldn't see anything. Everything's just so blurry.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that God had saved my life. And I was a different person than when I went into that airport.
Wow. Right. That's amazing. Thank you so much for telling that story. And thank you for being vulnerable, because I know parts of that story is really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
there's no doubt.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how long do you think that you were at the airport for, like in Atlanta?
I don't know, maybe 8 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe 6 hours. I'm not positive, and I'm not positive that Melvin or Marvin or whoever actually is the one that took me to. I don't know that, because I've called the airport and I've called the hospital, and they have no record of anybody taking me or me even really existing. And so, so I don't know 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it after that whole experience, is that when you started to turn your life around?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. So like I said, I got out of that hospital and I realized that my life was the airplane crash, and I survived an airplane crash, and I should not have survived. And it was only by God's grace. And so what used to be impossible for me to do, like if you would have defined my life, I would have defined it as weak and cowardly before Atlanta. And God changed me. That's what it is. And I come out of that airport, and no longer am I afraid of facing the things I need to face. Mm. And so I had warrants in multiple states. I didn't have a driver's license. And so I started facing those things, right? I started trying to get my life in order, you know. First thing is I got some contacts so I could see again. So I got some contacts, you know, got a job, and because I hadn't had a job in years. And so I got a job, which is a good idea, and started working, started talking to the courts, trying to deal with, because along the way I'd also got my third DUI. So I had 3 DUIs at this point. And I started facing that third DUI, doing what I needed to do to get it taken care of, and started paying the fines, and started, got this community service assigned to me. And then, you know, my kids, right? I had no relationship with them. And I just came to this conclusion one day that I need to call them. By one day, it's like right after I got back from Atlanta into Carthage. And so I start calling them every day. And one day, not too long after that, their mom called me and said, "Hey, I know what you're trying to do, but they don't want to talk to you. Why don't you just write them letters?" And old Josh, you know, I would have just crumbled, right? I would have escaped into whatever I needed to, so I didn't have to feel that. And but I felt it, and I kept calling every day, and I started to face those demons in my life, and I started to be honest. I started to tell the truth.
Yep.
And I still had my struggles. I still struggled with drinking after the airport for about 7 more months before I realized that if I continued to drink, it was going to drag me right back into that same path. And I still haven't, because I've journaled every day since 10/10/2014.
Oh, wow.
And so I can
awesome.
go back. I still go back to that day where I wrote, if I continued drinking, I'll end up taking my life. And it was so real, because I don't know if you want to include this or not, but there was a moment after that, God had saved my life in Atlanta, and I was still drinking. And when I drank, I got depressed, and I actually did try to hang myself in a closet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the thing broke, and I didn't die.
So did you give up drugs immediately afterwards? Okay, so the drinking was the only thing that really stayed for a little bit.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I don't think I did. I think that if I remember right, I smoked weed a couple times after that too. Right. So here's what I think I'm sharing this is because it's not always so cut and dry. Right. We like to live in this black and white world.
Yeah.
And it's not always black and white. But here's the thing is God is in control.
Yeah.
Right? And I had surrendered my life to him. And he was through this process taking me where I needed to be. Yeah. And so I did, for sure. I know that the weed was done before 2015.
Yeah.
And then I continued to drink, and it was May of 2015 that I stopped drinking.
I think a lot of people probably hear this message and think like, I can't exactly relate to that because it's like drugs or whatever. But there's in everyone's life, I know that they have struggles with something.
Yeah.
And I know for sure, like even for me, as you were saying all this, I'm like, and I'm thinking all the areas in my life where I'm like, man, I struggled with this, and it might not be drugs necessarily, but it's this, and like, you know, we all have our own struggles, and this story is really relatable to like everyone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. My wife, she says we're all in recovery. We're all recovering from something.
Exactly.
We are, and I agree with that totally. And I think like my story is like my gift. It's like it should give hope to anybody and everybody. Like it don't matter how far gone you are, man. God still can restore. There's just no doubt about it. Yeah. So quit drinking in May of 2015. I continued to face these legal issues. It was shortly after this. It was the winter of that coming year, 2016, that I finally flew back to Phoenix, Arizona again, and for a very special reason, to see my kids.
Awesome.
Right? Yeah, it was 2015. Sorry, 2015. So it had been almost 3 years since I had seen them, and man, I remember I had this countdown timer on my phone. Right, that like I started counting down from like I booked the flight at like 180 days out, so I was counting down. I would send them texts. It's 63 days, I'll see you. 51 days, I'll see you. So I flew to Phoenix, and my mom was living in an apartment there, and they met us there that day. I'll never forget that knock on the door. You know, just never. You know, I was not supposed to be there, man. And I opened that door, and there they are, my kids. It's 3 years. I felt like 100 lifetimes, and I just hug him. And it's my ex-wife and her new husband, and they decided to leave and let me stay with the kids for a few hours, because they were honestly, they still weren't sure, like my insane story, right?
Yeah.
He went to heaven in an airport, right? And none of it like made sense, and so they didn't know where I was at really mentally, and so. But I got to hang out with my mom for a few hours, and it was like once we started talking and hanging out, it was just like I'd always been with them, right? And then they came back, and I'll never forget this either. Is as her mom and their mom and stepdad comes back, and as they're walking out the door, Nevaeh jumps on her stepdad's back, and he carries her down the stairs away from me. And gosh, you know, when you have those moments when you realize like the damage, like what I've done, what have I done? And I also in that moment was so thankful that they were being taken care of, you know, because there's a lot of situations that don't, when parents abandon their kids, don't end up like that. Ended up that I was going to get to stay a few extra days, and I called and I asked if I could see the girls again, and my daughter, Nevaeh, Brielle, Nevaeh said no, she didn't want to see me again, and because she just didn't know when the next time would be, and she wanted to remember it the way it was. And so, like, I think I'm sharing, like, it chokes me up, but I'm sharing these things because, like, it's just not always like smooth sailing. You give your life to Jesus, right? It's not green lights all the way, man. It's just not. But I can say this, that God carried me through those times. As hard and as gut-wrenching and as painful as they are, you know what I didn't do is I didn't escape. Man, I didn't go back into drugs. I didn't go back into alcohol. I didn't go back into that deceitful type of life, right? Because I knew the truth now, and the truth had set me free, and God was my strength. Even though those times were so terribly hard, He was my strength.
Yeah.
He is my strength. And it was right after that I decided that, well, I kind of had to do this, is I decided to move back to Phoenix, and I was 35 years old at this time, all right? So this 35 years old, I have to go face these DUIs in Phoenix. And so I go back to Phoenix, and I'm living on my mom's couch in a one-bedroom apartment at 35 years old. Just as joyful, right? and happy because I have this second shot at life. I have like something I shouldn't have. And so I start facing these DUIs in Phoenix. I got through the one in Missouri. I ended up doing 200 hours of community service. I did the community service in Phoenix. Didn't think it was ever going to end, but I got to the end of it, did all the community service, did all the probation, paid the fines, then started on this other one. It was actually my first DUI that I got. I started paying the fines on that one, and I got that one all paid off. But the big one was the second DUI, which was a felony one. And in between me facing that DUI, I had an opportunity to actually come back to Missouri. My brother, during this whole time, he had been running from God. He had been homeless, and God had got a hold of him, and he was in this program, and I got to come down, and I got to spend 90 days with him. In this program, I got to be help out as a leader, and I got to live with him in his room, and we got to just rekindle this relationship with each other. And so when we're coming to this end of the 90 days, I know God, I faced this last DUI. And have you ever felt like God's told you something?
Yeah.
Like I felt like this. I felt like God had told me that you are not going to jail, right? You're not even gonna have to stand in a courtroom. Like I got this. And so I get a hold of the courts. They set up a court date for me because I'd been running from it for years. Mm-hmm. And so I get to the court, and I'm standing outside of it, and I just felt like I had this promise from God that I'm not gonna have to step into a courtroom. But I had to step into the courtroom. As much as I wish that was God's voice, man. Yeah. So I go in and I step in front of this court, in front of this judge, and she's like, "Where have you been? Why have you been running?" And like I tell her my story, and I'm thinking, this is it. They're gonna let me off the hook, right? They're gonna know I'm doing good. I'm helping out these people, all these people in Missouri, right? I'm sober. I'm in recovery. And she's like, "No, you're still getting charged for this, and it is going to involve jail time." And so she resets the court date. And as I get a public defender, I get a lawyer. They tell me that I'm probably going to have to do, I think, 6 months in prison was what 4 months. They wanted 4 months in prison is what the courts wanted. And again, I was so convinced that God had told me, "You're not going to go to jail, right? You're not even going to stand in front of a judge again." But through that process of learning, like even learning how to identify God's voice in my life, opposed to what I want to hear, opposed to what he's actually speaking to me. Yeah. Right. I grew tremendously, and so for months, back and forth, to court. Sometimes I'd come back here and I would help out. It was actually at the Freedom Dream Center, was where my brother was. I'd help out there, and then I'd have to fly back for another court date, or I'd be sleeping on my mom's couch. And so I'm just dealing with this, going back and forth. And finally, it was in, believe it or not, October again. It was on 10/1/17 that I had to come back and I had to go to jail. And I didn't, ended up not being 4 months. They ended up sentencing me to 30 days. Okay. So way better. But here's the thing is like, I had built this relationship with my kids now, and I talk to them every day. And like, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, man. I don't want to go 30 days without talking to my kids. And like, it doesn't make sense, God, because why do I have to go to jail? I have come out of this. I am on the other side of this. Why would I have to go back to jail? And I fought with it. Mm-hmm. But I showed up on 10/1/2017, still believing there was a sliver of hope that maybe they wouldn't take me in. But they did. And so I had to go to jail. And in jail, I ended up getting the nickname the Podfather because I was able to minister to so many men inside that jail. Wow.
So God had a plan through that
even
for
in
you.
That.
That's amazing.
I know. And here's the thing: is after 10 days, they approved me for work furlough. So after 10 days in jail, what that meant is that I got to get out every day, go to work, and I just had to spend the night in jail. And so I still got to talk to my kids. I still like a situation, right? That was bad, but like God just still showed his goodness and his mercy in it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so I get out of jail. Here's the thing is after I get out of jail, I have 2 years of probation. I'm not allowed to leave the state of Arizona. And so I have to buckle down. and I do. And from 2017 to 2019, I'm in Phoenix, and I'm working. Honestly, odd jobs as I'm trying to pay off the fine still. Still can't drive. I'm on probation, and I had to take these Ubers all the time to go see my probation officer, and it was just so expensive. But anyways, here's the thing: is like God provided, though. That's like what I'm saying. Like as I went through these 2 years of probation, and honestly, I wanted to be back in Missouri, but I still had to live in Phoenix. One of my friends ended up taking me in, and his wife turned their craft room into a bed for me. Thank you, Zach. And I lived there with them, and I got plugged in at a church there, a big church. I started serving at this church. I got in this men's group where we could just be honest and open and raw with each other, and God started to ignite this idea of ministry in my heart again. And it was at the beginning of 2019 that I'd finally jumped through all the hoops I needed to get my driver's license back. And I'll never forget that day. I got that letter in the mail that says, "You are approved to get your driver's license back." Man, it was like, I might as well win a lottery. It was just so cool. And so I got my driver's license back. This is a great part of this story is one of my friends, he has been on this journey with me the whole time. And he knew that I didn't have a vehicle. And he bought me a car.
Dang.
Bought me. Still got it. The Jeep.
Yep.
I call it the Jesus Jeep. Yeah. And he bought that thing for me. And I just think like how God orchestrates and works through all of these things, all these hard things that I walk through, all these good things that I walk through as well. But God he's just so there, like there. So I get this Jeep. I have to have the, what's the thing called that you got to blow into?
Breathalyzer
deal. And so I have that. And anyways, I honestly, what I did, this was like spring of 2019. I just said, I'm going to go see my kids, man. I can drive now. And so I got in that Jeep and I drove to Tennessee from Phoenix, Arizona, and I surprised my kids. And it was so awesome. I got to surprise my kids. I got to hang out with them a few days, but then I had to drive back. So I drove back to Phoenix, Arizona. And that's a long drive in a Jeep, a standard, by the way. And so I drove back, and I actually had an opportunity. I worked for like a week or two to save some money, and I drove to California, and I stayed there for a few weeks with my sister right on the beach. It was like incredible time, cool. Right? And then I knew what God was stirring up inside of me. At this point, after staying with my sister in California, I was officially off of probation. So I could travel with a travel pass, but I couldn't actually move out of Arizona. And finally, my probation came up, and I knew God had put in my heart to come to Missouri. And so I come back from California, pack up my stuff in the Jeep. This time I have a little bit more stuff, not just a suitcase or a trash bag, right? I'm like upgraded to 2 suitcases now. So I've got 2 suitcases, and I drive to Missouri. I get to Marshville, Missouri, where my brother is at now. My brother who was homeless, my brother who was lost, is now saved, and now he's actually ministering. He's a preacher at a church. And so I go back to Marshville, Missouri, and he is preaching at a place called The Well. And I go back there, and I had really no idea about what The Well was or anything. And so I go back to Marshville, and I start sleeping on his couch. Something about me and sleeping on couches. So I start sleeping on his couch. This opportunity opens up. Like I know that God put it in my heart. Like this ministry just like back up in me, like bubbling up in me. And this call, and so I go to Missouri, and I don't know what's going to happen or what it's going to look like, and it was July of 2019, and I think in August of 2019 or September, like it was only a couple months later that this opportunity opens up to start this Bible study in Aurora, Missouri, and with The Well, and so. They talked to me, Pastor Selena, and my brother. It was weird being interviewed by my brother, but I got interviewed, and like they talked to me about it, and they decided, yeah, let's have you go kick this Bible study off in Aurora, Missouri. And there was this church that was no longer having church, and so the Well acquired it, and they sent me down there, and that first Friday, we did them on Friday nights. That first Friday night, we were expecting, 30, 40 people, and 100 people show up.
Wow, that's amazing.
Man, it's just like, what in the world? And it was after that, we decide like this is not a Bible study. This is going to be a church, and so we start making the plans to transition it from just being a Bible study to making it. This is going to be a church here in Aurora, Missouri, and we kick off our first service, and it's awesome. And a week later, COVID happens, and we get shut down. Right. Get shut down for I think it was 8 or 9 weeks, and but we go back and we start having service on Sundays, and like I just like if you guys have stuck with me this long as I've been talking, like think about like where my life was, and now here I am preaching the gospel to people, seeing people give their life to Christ. Like it's an impossible journey, impossible, you know. And so I'm preaching and I'm doing this at the well, and then this opportunity opens up for me to possibly come and be a senior pastor in Monette, Missouri at Monette Nazarene Church. And for months and months, me and my wife, we talk and pray. We talk to Selena and my brother. Chris Carver here. We know we don't want to take this and do it lightly. And we feel like this is where God has called us. So that was 3 years ago.
That's incredible.
3 years ago tomorrow.
Wow.
Or today. Tomorrow. 3 years ago tomorrow is when we stepped out and came to Monette, Missouri. And I took over the senior pastor here at Monette Nazarene Church. And what a journey, man. Like even as I talk about it, like it's almost like sometimes I think like it's like these were separate people, but this was all my life, you know?
It's hard, like knowing you now to hear your story, like from long ago. Like it's just, it doesn't seem like it's really you. Like it's hard to think that this was you.
I know.
But like, you know, I think one of the biggest things for you that you've done over the years that I've seen is you're one of the most disciplined people that I know. Huh. And so you're very regimented with your schedule, and clearly like you putting in the work and all that stuff has made your life turn out to what it is now. So
yeah,
I'm really proud of you.
Thank you, man.
You're such an inspiration.
Thank you. I mean, like I wasn't like this though. Like God changed me, and like, man, if he can do it for me, he can do it for anyone.
Yeah.
There's just no doubt about it. I think what my main issue was I was just a liar, and it just bogged me down so much. And when I could finally become honest and real, and it just freed me.
So what did you want to do career-wise originally?
Okay, so as long as this story I told you, it's still the abbreviated version, to be honest with you. Originally, what I wanted to be when I was in my teens, I wanted to be a preacher.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to be, or a rock star, but preacher.
That seems like two completely.
I think either way, like I had this calling, right?
Yeah.
To communicate with people.
Yeah.
And so that was from a very young age. That was what I felt like my calling was. And then I kind of fell into the fitness industry, and I think that's probably my answer. Yeah, I don't know, because I never felt like the fitness industry was going to be my life, or even selling air conditioners. You know. And then I kind of just lost sight of all that.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you're like regimented in? Like what are, I know some of your habits, but I want the audience to kind of hear some of your habits.
So I say like before Christ, the only thing that I was faithful in was being unfaithful. You know, I couldn't never keep it together. You know, I couldn't wake up before 2 or 3 p.m. most of the time. You know, it seemed impossible to me to live a regimented, structured life. And now I am up early. You know, for a while I was doing 5 a.m. Since I had shoulder surgery at the beginning of the year, it's kind of changed my sleep patterns a little bit. Yeah. So usually I'm up 6 a.m. I like to do a prayer walk first thing. So and that has changed recently, but this is something that's been filling my soul lately. Is I do a prayer walk first thing, and then I'll go to the gym, and then I'll come back, and I love to do my cold plunge. So I'll get in there in that icy bath and sit in there, and then I will.
And you're actually the one that got me into that originally.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I just got a chiller system for it too, and so now it's like it is just so cold all the time, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I took a break from it, to be honest, after my surgery. Man, it was hard to get back into it, but now I'm finally getting in a rhythm again. And then, like me and my wife, we've undertaken this thing where we're done paying $7 a day for coffee. And so I've got this French press. We got an espresso machine. And so her and I, we have like this thing where we'll get together after I work out, after I cold plunge, and we'll make our coffee for the day. And it's just kind of turned into this moment for us where she will make her mocha, whatever. And then I will make my coffee, drink my coffee. I'll do my Bible study. And then I'll plan my day. And then I will go take my appointments or write or whatever is on my docket for the day. And then at the end of the day, I'll review my day and plan for tomorrow. And that's kind of like what a day looks like for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've learned the discipline thing from you a lot. There's a lot of spots in my life where I was like, well, what would Josh do here?
That's great. And I'm not. Here's what part of my thing is I struggle with trying to find the perfect day. I don't know if anybody else has ever struggled with that, but my wife sometimes want to punch me in the nose because I fight and struggle and wrestle trying to create the perfect day, and I don't think it really exists, but I try to do it. You know?
Yeah. I'm the same way. Like I'll change my schedule here and try this for a little bit, and I'm like, I don't like that, and then. But yeah, I want to get to where I'm more like regimented. Like this is what I do at this time. This.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I agree. And here's something else I want to share, and we might even have to put this in a different spot. But not only did God restore the relationship with my kids, but He brought Brooke into my life, right? Yeah. And I married Brooke, and out of that, we got 2 more kids. So we had this beautiful blended family. And by the way, we got married on 10/10/2020. So we took that day, right? Awesome. 10/10 when I was supposed to die, and allowed that to be the day that's created life.
So let's go into that a little bit. So how did you end up meeting Brooke?
So I met Brooke at the well. She was actually a member of another church, but one of her friends invited her to come to the well, and she came to the well, and we met. And she friend zoned me, to be honest. I stayed persistent. Yep. And it was about after 90 days of talking and being persistent that we decided that maybe there is something there. And we actually fasted for a while, and then we came back together, and God just kind of laid it all out, and we knew. And so we started dating, and probably 6 months later we got engaged. 7 months later we got engaged, and then got married in 10/10/2020. And what a blessing, man. I just want to encourage people, God is the God of restoration. You go through hard things. I don't want that to be not seen. It's not like everything is green lights and sunshine and rainbows. Yeah. But God is good, and he is a God of restoration, and I have got to walk in that, and it's amazing.
What's one thing that you're scared to do, but if you did it, it would make you better?
One thing I'm scared to do, submit this book, finish this book proposal, and actually submit it. Yeah. I honestly have dragged my feet on it. It's maybe I don't believe fully that I could have a published book, or I don't know what exactly it is, but that is one thing I struggle with. One thing I fear, probably.
Yeah. That's something I struggle with, is that little bit of doubt, that could keep you from getting where you want to be. And so I don't know. I have several areas in my life where I'm like, crap, I really need to focus and get this thing done. And, So how can people connect with you?
Okay. So I'm not real big on social media. So I really don't have a social media. I share one with my wife, but people can connect with me if they go to monazchurch.com. And from there, they can email me, or you could show up on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. That as well. But from there, from our website, you can contact me. Even on our Facebook, if you look up me, I'm going to show up, and you can contact me there as well.
Do you have a final message for our audience?
I think my final message would be, there's this scripture that's been in my life forever, even when I was in addiction. It actually came to me when I was at a sales meeting when I was in the fitness industry in my early 20s. And it's Joshua 1:9, and it's God commanding Joshua to be strong and courageous. Right? He's saying, you don't have to be dismayed or terrified. And that word dismayed means shattered, right? Your life doesn't have to be shattered. You don't have to be terrified. You don't have to live in fear. You can be strong and courageous. And it's not because of me that I can be strong and courageous, or it's not because of my situation that I can be strong and courageous. It's because God is with me wherever I go. That's how that text finishes up. You be strong and courageous, for God is with you wherever you go. And I think as I look back on my life, I see that. I see how God was with me wherever I went. So if I had a final message for anyone today, it's this: I don't know what your struggle is, or what your life is like behind closed doors, but I want to tell you this, that whatever that life looks like, those things you don't want people to know about, if you will drag those things into the light, if you will drag those things and you'll surrender them to God, you will find out that this God has been with you wherever you go. And he wants to set you free in a way that you cannot imagine. You just have to understand that you can be strong and courageous. You can be open and transparent and honest, and watch how God changes your life.
That's amazing. I completely agree, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you guys for watching the Kurima podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.